Human beings have an ingrained biological aversion to deep, dark spaces. When we look into a void where light cannot escape, our brains struggle to process the absolute absence of information. Priya Sharma approached these spaces differently. As an architectural photography student documenting abandoned buildings in Rajasthan, she viewed decaying structures through a purely analytical, clinical lens. But the locals of Kimsar village operated on a different set of rules. For 60 years, they maintained a strict physical and verbal perimeter around the ruined Devadas Haveli. If a visitor asked about the property, conversations abruptly stopped. Priya crossed that boundary. Standing in the Haveli's overgrown courtyard, she leaned over the edge of a dried-out stone well. Instead of stagnant air, a sudden, unnatural cold updraft hit her face. Priya's reliance on clinical documentation overrode the local warning system. In Kinsar, the behavioral data of the residents points to a specific historical danger that her academic framework failed to account for. Ignoring the chill, Priya raised her camera and fired the flash into the darkness. Immediately, a deep, hollow vocalization echoed upward from the stones. This image on the camera screen shows what the sensor captured. Down at the absolute bottom of the well's pitch-black interior, there is a faint, blurry shape. It resembles a human face, staring straight up. Back in the village, the local innkeeper offered a specific, terrifying warning. The well is not an empty void, and whoever looks into it gives the entity inside permission to look back. A camera's viewfinder is designed to create distance between the observer and the subject. In this case, it functioned as a two-way mirror. By capturing the entity's image, Priya transformed herself from a passive observer into a marked target. Returning to the Haveli the next day, Priya realized she was no longer alone. A second set of footsteps echoed her exact pacing. When she walked, they walked. When she stopped, they stopped. The air in the room shifted. She noticed a highly concentrated, localized odor, the smell of ancient wet moss mixed sharply with burning hair. Fleeing to the courtyard, Priya noticed this physical anomaly on the edge of the well. Pressed into the dry moss was a stark, fresh, wet human handprint. The fingers were pointed inward, indicating the pressure was coming from someone pushing upward from the inside. Residual hauntings act like tape recorders, playing back historical echoes. But physical manifestations, like displaced water and targeted tracking, indicate a behavioral shift. The entity had escalated from an environmental anomaly into an active predator. Priya abandoned the project and fled back to a third-floor apartment in urban Delhi, hundreds of miles away.
But geographic distance offered no protection. On her fourth night back, she awoke to the familiar smell of wet stone. Beside her bed, clearly pressed into the floorboards of her high-rise apartment, were two damp, mossy footprints. Standing in the center of her bedroom was a figure in a white sari. As the entity turned its head, Priya saw her exact face. The entity made no physical move to harm her. Instead, Priya felt an overwhelming cognitive fog, as if her name and her memories were being systematically extracted and replaced by the figure at the foot of her bed.
The doppelganger manifestation represents a total overwriting of the subject. By adopting Priya's physical likeness, the entity began to displace her personal history, effectively erasing her presence from her own life. Desperate, Priya's friend consulted Dhruv, a researcher specializing in local paranormal history. He traced the anomaly back to a verifiable crime committed at the Devadas Haveli. This timeline charts the catalyst event. In 1958, the property owner, Devidas, murdered his wife, Salochana Devi, by shoving her into that specific well so he could seize her inherited land. But Salochana did not die on impact. She survived at the bottom of the dry well for 3 agonizing days. For 72 hours, Salochana remained conscious in total isolation. This period of sustained agony created a state of trauma calcification, where the intensity of the event permanently bonds a consciousness to the physical site of its death. This created specific rules of attachment. Since her death was defined by abandonment, anyone who peers into her void becomes a potential vessel, offering her a psychological exit route. These entities function as the physical remnants of human cruelty. They remain tethered to the specific geometry of the site where their trauma was most acute, seeking a way to re-enter the world through the attention of others. Dhruv proposed a psychological exorcism. Priya had to return to the geographic anchor point, acknowledge the historical injustice directly, and grant the entity permission to leave. Standing at the edge of the well in Kimsar, Priya spoke into the dark. She named Sulochana, validated her painful isolation, and told her she was no longer trapped. The environment reacted immediately. A deep, exhausted sigh echoed up the stone shaft, and the unnatural cold wind abruptly stopped. Returning to Delhi, Priya found her apartment quiet. The phantom footsteps ceased, the smell of burning hair vanished, and the doppelganger never returned. A haunting is often a violent demand to be seen. By acknowledging the reality of the historical trauma, Priya seemingly neutralized the threat, breaking a cycle of isolation that had lasted 6 decades. Back in Delhi, Priya attempted to delete the original photograph from her phone's hidden folder. Every time she reached for the delete button, inexplicable nausea stopped her. The file remained untouched. A month later, she received a late-night phone call. The caller ID was blank, and it left 0 digital footprint on her phone's call log. When she answered, the voice on the other end was echoing, as if speaking from the bottom of a deep cavern. It was Priya's own voice, and it gave a single command: do not delete the photo. She immediately opened the hidden folder. As you can see on the screen, the ghostly shape is no longer at the bottom of the well. The pale face has moved up, resting just beneath the surface. Physical locations can be abandoned, and architectural anchors can be cleansed, but digital media creates a flawless, permanent replication of the original void. It immortalizes the trauma, leaving a digital loophole that ensures the door remains perpetually open.